Hello and welcome to the final episode, Season 2 of CarWale's Driver's Car series. And I'm so happy that we're ending this with a petrol manual. There's something about a petrol manual that feels more connected, at least to me, than let's say a diesel or if there is an automatic. So I'm happy that we're ending this with a petrol manual. Now, the body style remains an SUV and there are two reasons for that. One is a lot of you wanted to know how the Honda Elevate will perform in this series, and so we've got the Honda Elevate. And the second reason is that it is a kind of throwback to our Season 1. We had the Honda City in Season 1 and we absolutely loved it. The Elevate, in a sense, is the Honda City in SUV body style. So we want to see how much of a difference a body style or change in shape makes to the soul of a car when it comes to being a driver's car. And that's our goal today. And that's what we are going to try and find out. But before we explore the answer, we wanted to remind you that we have partnered with IOCL's XP95 for this series. XP95 boasts of a high 95 octane rating and it promises many advantages from enhanced performance to better fuel economy. XP95 also offers an added layer of protection for your engine's vital components. Thanks to the inclusion of specialized additives, concerns about corrosion and fuel injector blockages are effectively mitigated. And be it turbo petrols or naturally aspirated ones, like in the case of the Honda Elevate, IOCL says XP95 helps deliver on both counts. As for the Honda Elevate, yes, it is powered by a naturally aspirated petrol engine when almost all of its competition has moved to turbo petrols. The engine is a 1.5-litre four-cylinder with iVTEC. It develops almost 120 bhp and has a peak torque of 145 Newton-meter. The torque peaks somewhere in the mid-range, but its max power comes in at a heady 6,600 rpm. This is what you get in the city as well, and like the city, the Elevate 2 uses a 6-speed manual gearbox. The Elevate is naturally heavier and it runs different settings for the suspension, but the hardware of the suspension is similar to the City, including McPherson struts up front and a torsion beam axle at the rear. But the Elevate sits on a longer wheelbase. It runs larger 17-inch wheels with wider tires and it obviously sits much higher off the ground. So how does all this translate to the road? Now the engine, of course, continues unchanged from the City, so it's still a naturally aspirated unit. It's still 120 horsepower, 145 Newton meters of torque, and all that power comes very high up in the rev range, 6,600 rpm. But that's the beauty of a naturally aspirated engine that likes to be revved. It is not fast. There's no argument there, it's not fast. And you have to stay between 5,000 to 7,000 RPM to really make the most of it. So on a road like this, you'd be doing second, third, but mostly second. But it is the build-up of RPM, like now. It's like you never run out of revs. You just have so many revs to play with. And with a naturally aspirated engine, at least in the Elevate's case, the throttle response also is so linear, so you can keep, even though the turn of speed takes its time, it comes in. When it comes in, you can play with it. There's no big bang kind of thing. It's just builds up very linearly. So many revs, you forget about it, that this can go up to 7,000 RPM. That's a lot of revs. Chances are you never use them, on a daily basis, but it's just a very different feel. It's more like motorcycles where you keep revving. Of course, it doesn't rev as quickly as a motorcycle, but that feel is still very much there. Would I say the engine is a weak link in this package because it doesn't make enough power or torque? No. I think the engine is the highlight because it's so different from what you're getting in this class of cars now that this takes you back. It's kind of old school, and old school has its own charm. Why wouldn't you want to enjoy engine revs when you have a good petrol? I mean, that's the whole point of having a good petrol engine, that you're able to rev it. But yeah, I mean, it does take a little bit of work in the sense that takes you a little bit out of your comfort zone because the engine does get loud. So you start wondering, am I overdoing it? But no. When I like this engine. I like the fact that it's naturally aspirated. I like the fact that it revs up to 7,000 RPM. And I also like this fact that you can't easily use all of those 7,000 RPM. You have to be committed. You have to show that you really want to use them. And when you do, it's a rewarding experience. Oh, yes. Wow. This is brilliant. If there's one thing that Honda does well, it's manual gearboxes. And it doesn't matter what kind of car you're in, they just do a lovely job. I mean, it starts with where the gear shifter is placed. It's beautifully placed, so you don't have to reach for it. It just falls easily to hand. You never need to look at it. And then, of course, is the shift quality. The throws are short. It is precise. And there's not a hint of weakness that's involved in the gear shift. It's not what you'd probably hear sometimes is rifle bolt kind, but still, it's pretty slick and you can go through it without ever engaging a wrong gear. So, very engaging gearbox. Love the gearbox on this one too. If I'd had to nitpick, I'd say that it can be a little notchy at times. So if you want to go through it really quickly, that's when you want to be slightly careful because chances are that it might not slot it the way you want it. But if you pay attention and do it, it falls into place every time. Beautiful. Now the steering on the Elevate, to me, is slightly big in diameter. I would like it to be a little smaller. It's not too big, but it just seems like there's a lot of... my hands seem to be a little more far apart than I would have liked. The other thing is that it is not a quick steering. It's got over 3 turns lock to lock, so you have to dial in a lot of steering lock to go through corners, especially if they're tight as we are on the road now. But the good thing about the steering is that once you get the hang of how, I wouldn't say how slow, but let's say how not quick or average the steering is in terms of response, you get used to that, and then you start enjoying the linearity of the steering. So you know every time you turn, you know how much it's going to turn, you know where the car is going to be. So it becomes very easy to place the car. Of course, it's more work than a quicker steering would be, but you do get used to it. It's not a strong highlight for the Elevate, but it doesn't really get in the way, or take away from it being a good driver's car. So a mixed bag, the steering, but something that you can get used to. The Elevate is slightly heavier than the City. It is, of course, it sits on a longer wheelbase, and it is a lot off the ground or taller than the City. So that is going to have some effect to a car's handling. But it doesn't take away too much from the Elevate, and I'm really surprised at how good the chassis remains. I mean, it's of course a great starting point because the City is a great car to begin with in terms of dynamic ability. And the Elevate too, I mean, you might think that it would rob the car of some dynamic ability, but the front end is pointy. It goes exactly where you want it. You can lean on it. It's thoroughly enjoyable. I am seriously surprised. There is no hint of understeer. It'll do exactly what you want. The body roll is there, but it's not significant, so it's not like it's rolling on its tires or it's rolling excessively. So you know how much to push it before it starts misbehaving in a sense. And that brings us to the one problem we have with this setup. Honda's been too safe with this, with the Elevate. I mean, it's a good chassis. They should have respected their own ability, but here, even after you switch off the ESP is off here, it just cuts in. It doesn't let you explore what the chassis can do. Even a wee bit, the car moves, even slightly if the car moves, the ESP just comes in, and it's not, it breaks your flow, of course, because you're trying to extract that little bit more, so it is that much more exciting. It doesn't let you do that. But of course, if you dial back a little, then of course it flows beautifully through corners. You know exactly what to do. And like I said, yes, the steering is slow, but once you get used to it, you can really put the car where you want it. You can, a windy road like this, it's slightly broken, but nothing affects the Elevate. It'll go over the bumps, it'll skip a little, but it'll hold its line. You can push it to the corner at the end, tip it in, bring it in. You can keep changing the line as you want. You can really play with this car. And if we could turn off the ESP completely, then we could get some good angles, also pack it into corners, and that would be even more wonderful. But sadly, Honda engineers haven't allowed us to do that. But yeah, beautiful handling car. For an SUV, yes. And just like the City, that soul that we were talking about of a driver's car in terms of handling, oh yeah, it's very good. Now the Elevate might be slightly heavier than the City, but it's not a whole lot heavier. And like we said, the handling is absolutely spot on. And what complements this handling are the brakes. There is a little more play in the brakes than we would have liked. So, like in the pedal, so you gotta go a little deep into the pedal before it starts biting. But the bite and the progression and the feel is so good, you can really lean on the brakes. And even when you're coming downhill, you're going, that's where you need that sort of strong brakes that last, and you can lead them or trail them into corners. These brakes allow you to do that. And never does the Elevate feel heavy under braking. So you never feel like you're using too much of the brakes, or the brakes are inadequate. And you can modulate them well, so you're never struggling with ABS kicking in early. I think the bigger tires compared to the 17-inch compared to 16-inch on the City help, plus they're wider. So I don't know if there's any difference in braking hardware. I didn't read about that. But the feel, the bite, the progression on the brakes, very good. You can really, really lean on them. The one thing we wanted to find out with this video is if the Elevate retains the soul of the city as a driver's car. And it absolutely, absolutely does. Yes, it is a little heavier and larger, but honestly, we haven't found it struggling at all. It is not very quick, of course, with the naturally aspirated engine, it is never going to be. But it more than makes up for that with the handling and the braking. Yes, the steering too could have been better, slightly quicker. But we can live with that because it's linear, it's predictable, and you can make the Elevate do what you want it to, because once you know how much to dial in the lock, it's all good. Then, of course, the gearbox. I mean, it's short throw, it's nice, it's involving, you don't mind shifting. So overall, yes. I mean, it is a good driver's car. It retains that soul. Do we miss a turbo engine on this? Not really. I mean, of course, if you want a really, really fast car, then yes, you'd probably have to look somewhere else. But speed, outright speed on a road like this isn't really that important as, let's say, the dynamic ability, feel, and the joy that a car brings when it connects with you because it's doing exactly what you want. It feels intuitive. The Elevate does. And no, I don't have a problem that it's an SUV, it's a little more off the ground. Really, it's not much of a difference. It's still pretty playful.